too broad and too general a term to really talk about how we adapt and how we're going to mitigate some. And I like to refer to the consequences of that as a global wetting. And that is the idea that there's more water than we can handle. And we need strategies and adaptations to try and handle the higher frequency and the higher magnitudes of water. So building structures is not the way to go. You got to work with nature, not against nature on that front. So moving people out of the hazardous zones, for example, is one critical one. Being able to engage people to help retain water. Green roofs, green gardens, green landscape, green lawns. It's a critical aspect of trying to be able to capture that first bit of rainfall that falls. And if you can store more just naturally, those are really a grassroots way of trying to retain water.
Disaster relief is expensive. And this really is, you know, $1 of prevention is worth like $100 of trying to clean it up afterwards. Yeah, I think this report gets a lot of things right. I mean, it's saying Toronto needs to have the twin challenges of a destabilizing climate and growing inequality at the core of what the city does for the coming decades. That's going to take focus, it's going to take money, but failing to do that is going to cost us a lot more. If we want to make sure this doesn't become just another report sitting on a shelf gathering dust, it's actually going to take pressure from citizens, from community organizations, from environmental groups to make sure that this is front and center every time they're talking about a budget decision, every time they're talking about infrastructure, what we're going to build, how they're talking about how we're going to deal with inequality. This resilience issue and climate change needs to be at the center of that, and that only happens with pressure.
I think when you look at the city's Transform TO program and when you look at our infrastructure program taken together, we have hundreds of millions of dollars set aside for investment over the next 10 years, I hope complemented by a lot of money coming from the other governments as well, to do the kind of work that has to be done. And some of that is on the island, much of it is of course on the mainland, but I can only say that this strategy adds some additional ideas to things we'd already taken on board as to the need for us to prepare ourselves better for different kinds of flooding that happen across the city, caused by unusual weather patterns and by the growth in the city, where the infrastructure over decades did not keep up with the growth in the city. So this report will help us to continue to address ourselves to that, and there'll be a report coming forward with recommendations arising out of this strategy very shortly.
What the city needs to do to make all this happen? Any parting thoughts?
Toronto doesn't have what we call a flood risk model. So we may know based on history that it's, you know, Lower Simcoe or it's Rockcliffe Smythe that flood, but when you take into account climate change, critical infrastructure, social vulnerability, you know, we don't really have a tool that helps us prioritize our investments in that way, and that's one of the key recommendations in the strategies that we need to build that. You know, the number one way to predict if you're going to flood in the future is whether you flooded in the past. I don't think there's anybody who's moving fast enough to keep up with climate change, and we don't even know how fast it's moving. But I think that, you know, what you've seen here today is a real commitment from the city to take a big step forward with the resilience strategy. And there are, you know, more than 20 actions in there. It represents a significant investment by the city. So, you know, no, we're never moving fast enough. I think we need to put more behind it. But I think this is a huge step forward. It's a big step in the process.
If we don't take these steps, just how bad is it going to get for Toronto?
Well, loss of life would be the worst. We learned that lesson in 1954 with Hurricane Hazel. 80 plus lives were lost as a result of an extreme event. We can't have that happen again. It's going to take investment. And there's no question about that in terms of stormwater management. Sewer systems have to be upgraded, and the way we capture water on the land surface has to be improved as well.